Hi, this is Roger McGuinn, and my favorite station is WMNF, Tampa, Florida.
The governing body of WMNF, the Nation B. Stubblefield Foundation, is seeking applicants for our board of directors. This seat is open only for someone under the age of 30 and not currently volunteering. We would love for the diversity of our board to reflect the diversity of our community. The deadline to apply is Monday, January 12th at 5 p.m. You may find the application online at WMNF.org under Station Updates. If you would like more information, please email WMNF@WMNF.org. Thank you.
Everybody lives on a street in a city or a village or a town for what it's worth. And they're all inside a country which is part of a continent which sits upon a planet known as Earth. And the Earth is a bowl full of oceans and some mountains that is out there spinning silently in space.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa 88.5, where every Monday at 11 we bring you a conversation with local experts on sustainable issues. Today's guest is Shanti Pierce, talking about the many uses of bamboo. So stay locked in to the left side of your dial to find out more. Maddie's taking your calls and the marvelous Mr. Bill Grace is working the boards. I am Tanya Vidovic, your host for today. Before we get into our main program, Miss Kitty Wallace has an interesting event or two to tell you about. Are you there, Kitty?
Weekend, huh? Wonderful to speak to you and let you know about a couple things that are going on from the garden. The Clearwater Community Garden is having a holiday craft workshop next Sunday, December 14th, from 11 to 2 at the Clearwater Community Garden. The other events are happening after that. So there is let me get this here, it is a holiday gift-making workshop at the Sustainable Living Project on Friday, December the 19th at 4 o'clock. The Sustainable Living Project is located just across the street from Lowry Park Zoo Tampa. On the 20th, the Healthy 22nd Street Community Garden is presenting a nutrition and cooking class for an easy holiday, and that will be held at the Hope Community Center at 4902 North 22nd Street on Saturday, December the 20th. So we got room for everyone. Come on down. It's going to be cooking, so there's going to be food. Also on the 20th, let me see, is another event coming up with the Audubon. Oh, wait a minute. I want to mention this one in Ruskin. Ruskin Christmas Market on Saturday, December 20th, and Sunday, December 21st. There'll be small and local last-minute gifts. So Ruskin Fresh Market at 2619 14th Avenue Southeast in Ruskin. Last thing I want to mention is the Audubon Christmas Bird Count. This is the 126th year of the Audubon Christmas Bird Count. So you can click into audubon.org and see if you live in an area all over the the world, but definitely all over the United States. You probably live in an area where they're accepting counts from citizen scientists, and that will be from December 14th to January 5th, so you can participate in that. All right, everyone, have a great week. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kitty. And my mistake, it is Sage that is answering the phone calls today. So sorry about that, Sage. We appreciate you. And on to our main show. Our guest today is the owner of This Bamboo Life and Bamboo Leaf Tea. Shanti Pierce has been working with bamboo since the mid-1990s, and she moved to Florida to work for Walt Disney's Imagineering as their bamboo and ornamental grass specialist on the Animal Kingdom project. And following that project, she began her own farm. She became interested in the medicinal uses of bamboo and pioneered the use of bamboo for tea and supplements in 2008 when she began her company, Bamboo Leaf Tea. I would like to welcome to guest, Shanti Pierce.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
No, absolutely. It seems like there might be a little bit of a delay. Just make sure you don't have any wireless mics or anything. So Shanti, how did you get into being a bamboo specialist?
Well, there's not very many of us. So, bamboos are, just for context, bamboos are the ancient grasses. They originated in the Cretaceous period, and they are where all of our smaller grasses that we know now as food, many of them came from. So, it's kind of fun to work with something that is from the dinosaur era and still utilize them today. There's over 2,000 different known bamboos and so many more. I think one of the things that people get confused about is that they think there's just one bamboo, and there's actually many, many, many different bamboos. So I was lucky enough to get into a company that I started working with at a nursery that turned out to be the ornamental grass bamboo specialist of the United States. And so that was how I got introduced into grasses and bamboos. And when I came to Florida to work for Imagineering, because all the grass people down here were turf grasses, we introduced ornamental grasses to Florida. Bamboos had already been here, but on a minor scale. And so from there, what was I think the most interesting thing about Animal Kingdom was that we were utilizing bamboos not just to hide things, which is what most people use them for even today. We were utilizing them to feed all of the animals. And Animal Kingdom became a project that really spread out into all over the world, that zoos then started to grow their own forages. We had a forage nursery. We still have a forage nursery at Animal Kingdom that fed all the animals in at Disney. And so it really spread that idea. And bamboos are one of the most useful plants for that because they're tough, they grow really fast, they're a great source of minerals. There are a lot of things that we'll get into, but that was a really interesting part. It was the beginning of thinking of bamboos as food and medicine.
And so you are a bamboo nutraceutical. How do you?
So nutraceuticals is basically a fancy way of saying that, plant medicine, right? And so most people think of plant medicine as like some sort of psychedelic journey, but really all plants are medicine, and all plants have a connection to us, and all plants, have in some way a medicinal value, some of them internally, some of them externally, some of them visually, some of them just being around them. For instance, with bamboos, they have multiple ways to have medicinal values. And one of the things that I can ask you, like, how do bamboos feel? How do you feel when you're around bamboo? And people will give me the response of like, it makes me feel calm. It makes me feel grounded. It makes me feel centered. And it's like, yes, you can tell me that. And I can tell you that scientifically, there are terpenes and phytochemicals coming out of plants. And for bamboos, it's myrcene. And myrcene is a phytochemical that makes you feel grounded and centered and calm and focused. And so there is always, those components are really interesting to me of how those relate to each other.
And so when did you start looking at bamboo as food and medicine and not just ornamental?
That from Animal Kingdom. So I think what's really fun now, if you fast forward, we've got, more interest around what we call silvopasture, which is a form of agroforestry. And so one of the things I do is to really educate people on utilizing bamboos. One of the biggest feedbacks that I get from people from bamboos, as far as the negative, is, how much it can grow. And that goes back to understanding that there are 2,000 known bamboos. Some of them only get this big, and some of them get 100 feet tall. Some of them will have like a 3-foot wide base. Some of them will have a 20-foot wide base in about 7, 10, 8 years. So it's always right plant, right place. But also I like to form the idea and put it in a way that these are working plants, right? You don't have working dogs in a condo, and you don't have working plants necessarily in a backyard. So unless you're going to work them and use them, they really have so many uses. Humans are so intimately tied with grasses for our food and for how we have gotten to this point in history to survive this many people on the planet. We have a really deep connection with grasses, and it stems from the bamboos. And we can take that further and go forward with it and utilize them for so many things. And that's a really good way to keep them in check, which is what I get a lot of feedback about.
You're listening to the Sustainable Living Show, broadcasting live from studios of 88.5 WMNF in Tampa. Today's guest is Shanti Pierce, talking about the benefits of bamboo. If you have a question for Shanti, give us a call, 813-239-9663. Text us at 813-433-0885, or send me an email, dj@wmnf.org, and I'll read it on the air. So you're talking about, first the bamboo, like as a grass, utilizing that as a as a visual option in landscaping, and then you're like, oh well, we can feed all of these animals. How did that step turn into you can feed us? Because out of the 2,000 types of bamboo, how many are edible, and how do you differentiate between them?
Yeah, so let's go back to a few basics of like how we can use bamboos, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got bamboos for privacy, which is the main use of bamboos in Florida. Yeah. And not just Florida.
They grow. Yeah. How fast do they grow when people use it for privacy or when they talk about it?
It depends on the context, but if you're going like on a 4-foot center for a living hedge, which is what most people do, you can generally get a light screen within a year. So it's a very good way to get privacy. And there's ones that are very upright. There's shorter ones. You can hedge them, which keeps their roots in check. Always remember, like when you hedge a bamboo or hedge any plant, you're actually root pruning at the same time. So it's a way to keep their roots in check. So for instance, you might utilize bamboo for privacy. It can also protect, say, your food forest, or say you're pushing a zone on a mango or something more tropical, or you're trying to go annuals and you're in a windy area like Okeechobee. So these are things that bamboos can help protect from just as a physical standpoint. So starting with that aspect. And again, right plant, right place as to how big you're going to let it get, or which species you're going to start with. So that's one way to use them. Once you have the bamboos, there's so many things that you can do with them, right? So one of the easiest gateway things is to utilize it as tea. And this is kind of how I started with the medicinal aspect for humans, because it was so familiar with me with using it for animals. And again, I'll go back to Animal Kingdom. We used bamboos to feed almost every animal in that park, because all the animals, even gorillas, will fight over bamboos. They love bamboo leaves, and bamboos are very, very high in minerals. They're especially high in silica. Silica is kind of this underknown mineral that we don't talk about a lot, but silica is it's the rejuvenation mineral, basically. It's what makes calcium more available. It helps build bone density. It builds collagen, connective tissues. It's known for hair, skin, and nails. But think of like when you're talking about bamboos, you're talking about strength and flexibility. You can look at a bamboo and see it has strength and flexibility. And that strength and flexibility is what silica is. Strength and flexibility can be your cardiovascular system. It can be the flexibility of every cell in your body. And so whether it's doing this for humans, what's really kind of cool is that it does this for humans, plants, and animals. So plants, what it ends up looking like is that it makes the plant more resilient, more drought tolerant, more resistant to disease, and physically makes it stronger so that pests have a harder time penetrating the outer layers of it. With animals, say like your dog, it will help prevent hip dysplasia. It will help build bone density. It makes their coat look amazing, right? For people, it's the rejuvenation, right? It's building that collagen. It's making your teeth stronger. It's healing broken bones or building bone density. So all of these things are things that bamboos do, on top of the fact that like bamboo and silica is a binder. So it makes other things more available, as far as like if you're looking to get more, you want to take ginger, for instance, for a reason, for a medicinal reason, or astragalus or some other herb, you can partner it with bamboo and bamboo will make it more bioavailable. So these are just kind of some basic outlines of how to utilize bamboos.
And so how do you know what varieties of bamboo have like silica in the leaves and that can be used edibly and medicinally?
Yeah. So
Now, there's a whoops for you there, Tanya. I don't know. Have you got anything you want to add? I mean, we can take a question from Juanita at the moment.
Sure. It looks like we lost Shanti, so we're going to give her a moment to reconnect.
She's sort of in the queue right now. I've just clicked her on in.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I lost you.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, so all the bamboos can be used for tea. And what I like to say is there's some that you can just, like, if you just have a small area and you just want something in a pot that you want to utilize the leaves for tea, you can keep bamboos in a pot. There are smaller dwarf bamboos that you can use. You can use all of the leaves of bamboos. So any of them are usable. As far as like edibility on using shoots are the microgreen of bamboos. They have the powerhouse of all the nutrients in a small condensed version. And we can grow here in Florida, we can grow a lot of different bamboos for bamboo shoots. They're a little more complicated because they have something called a cyanic glycoside, which is very common in plants. It's a bitter compound that, first of all, you don't want to eat it, but it's also can be toxic. So think of like cassava or yucca also have cyanic glycosides. And so it's something that you just have to have an awareness of. And so to get that out, there's several different ways to do it. The easiest one is to boil it. That being said, just like cassava, bamboos have a range from bitter to sweet as far as their shoots. The leaves you don't have to worry about at all, but the shoots have that concentration because, again, they're the microgreen of the bamboo. I have a lot of videos on my social media about how to do bamboo shoots because I get that it can be a little intimidating to think about cooking something that you've never cooked. But in general, all the bamboo shoots are edible, just they have more or less bitterness that you have to get out.
And so and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there's some bamboo shoots that have like these like sharp, spiny crystal things that can hurt you in your throat. Is that
oxalic acid?
Is that what it is? That like, I don't really know. Honestly, it was something that I heard years ago and it stopped me from eating bamboo.
Interesting. Never heard that one. No, actually, no, they're not high in oxalic acid. And the biggest thing you would have to be concerned about is the cyanic glycoside. But like, it would be extremely hard to eat. Cyanic glycoside is incredibly bitter and you just don't want to eat it. So it's one of those things that can be easily taken out with boiling, just like you would boil a potato or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And so how do you know what part is edible? Like how do you determine your bamboo shoot as being like the right size, the right, how can you tell? Is there like preparation? Do you have to peel it?
Yeah. So there's It's a little more, I like to start with the leaves just because leaves are kind of that thing. People are used to utilizing leaves for tea or for medicine, right? We have mint or different things that we can grow and make tea from. So I feel like that's a really easy step. And that being said, we'll start there because with the leaves, the easiest thing that you can do is just pick the leaves of bamboo, put them in water, bring them to a boil, turn them off. You will get 100% of the benefits just doing that. From there, you can dry them. You can do other things that make them taste a little bit better because boiling green leaves kind of has that little bit of green flavor. However, you are getting all the benefits. So you want to make it for your dog. You want to make it for you, for your kids, for whoever, whatever you're doing. You get 100% of the benefits. And if you have bamboos near you or in your yard or down the street, nobody is going to stop you from taking their leaves because there are a lot of them. So it's one of those things that's like knowledge becomes a social equalizer because medicinal value of things should be available to everybody. And bamboos are, especially in Florida, pretty much available to anybody where, within a short period of space, right? So that's the easiest way to do it. From there, you can sun dry them. It makes them taste a little bit better. You can do other things. Different bamboos have different flavors. They range too from like a light yellow all the way to a dark brown that's more like a black tea. So there are different flavors and you can get into that, but all of them have lots of silica. So you will be getting all of the minerals that you need just by doing that. With the shoots, it gets a little more complicated just because there's varieties that have sweeter and bitter and things like that. But in general, you would peel them. You harvest them when they're kind of that perfect triangle. And again, I just encourage you to kind of look at my social media, This Bamboo Life, and try and get a visual of what we're looking at. There's a lot of varieties of bamboos in Florida, and some are better for eating just because they're a little sweeter. And also, like, if they're bigger, that also is helpful because you're doing all this work and at least you're getting something that has more in there than something that's smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we actually have a phone call. So I'd like to welcome Mandy to the Sustainable Living Show.
Good morning.
Mandy, good morning.
Hi, Mandy.
Kanapaha Gardens. It's west of I-75, south of Gainesville. Last time I was up there years back, they had a wonderful bamboo garden with a multitude of different bamboo varieties. So if someone's wanting to see some in person, that's one good place to go do a picnic lunch.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that suggestion.
That's great. Botanical gardens in general are such a good resource for all plants, but especially bamboos. And I'm always suggesting to people, if they're, especially my northern people in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, to and always just look around and see what you see near you to see what it does, how big it gets, like where it's going to go, to get an idea if that's going to work for your context.
And my second comment is I have a friend who's getting elderly, and he has a tall bamboo, and I was curious if he decides to donate it again, if he still wanted to have a bamboo, what would be a small one that he would be better suited than this giant one that he has?
I love this question. Thank you so much for asking it, because I think people don't realize there are dwarf bamboos. So two of the small ones three I'll mention. One is a multiplex, which is fern leaf that gets about 14 feet tall and can be kept in a pot. There's also a smaller version of that, which is tiny fern, which only gets about 6 feet tall and is a fairly slow grower, because there's height and there's also how fast it grows, right? So the second one is dwarf mallee, which is a beautiful variegated kind of shrubby plant In the ground, it'll get maybe like in Stewart and down south, about 12 feet tall. Here in Central Florida, it'll probably get about 9 feet tall, but I've kept it in a pot and it stayed at like 3 feet tall for like 6 years. And the third one I'll mention is Richard Waldron, which has kind of more of like a grassy effect. Very tight clumping bamboo, gets about maybe 8 or 9 feet tall maximum. Does really great in a pot as well, so it can be kept in, on a patio somewhere. And these are all ones you can utilize for making tea as well as having that kind of grassy bamboo effect.
Yeah, because the one he's got, when the wind clatters, blows through it, it's kind of like, sounds like men fencing or something.
Yeah, it sounds like water.
It's a good size. Something that I did notice on his stand of bamboo when he's let it grow this time, and I think it's really getting too much for him because of his age, but to maintain. I had helped him years ago.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, Mandy. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I helped him years ago thin out the bed, and we did a big donation to Busch Gardens, and I was just curious if there's any other zoological that might want a donation of bamboo root balls.
Possibly Lowry Park.
Okay.
You could reach out to them. Other than that, it would be like finding somebody who wants it and, maybe through Facebook Marketplace or something like that.
Yeah, because
on Facebook, Tampa Gardening Swap, there's like 16,000 members. So throwing that out there as an opportunity would be probably a good way of getting it out.
Yeah.
They might be willing to dig it. You have to ask.
Digging is a whole thing.
You,
I don't know if you want to get into that a little bit as far as like removal of bamboo or downsizing of bamboos.
Well, I'd helped him downsize it years ago, but it needs to be done again.
Yeah.
That's when we did the big donation of the root balls to Busch Gardens because they used it for the elephants and the gorillas and the giraffes.
Amazing.
But that's what
awesome.
I was wondering if you knew off the top of your head if somebody was looking for the tall variety, because this probably gets anywhere from probably 50 to 100 feet tall.
Yeah, those would be my suggestions. Lowry Park.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your call, Mandy. I appreciate that. And you were listening to the Sustainable Living Show broadcasting live from the studios of 88.5 WMNF in Tampa. Today's guest is Shanti Pierce, talking about the benefits of bamboo. If you have a question for Shanti, give us a call at 813-239-9663. Text us at 813-433-0885 or email us at dj@wmnf.org and I'll read it on the air. So a lot of gardeners, when they hear the word bamboo, it kind of strikes a little bit of fear in them. So can you explain the difference between clumping bamboo and running bamboo? And which one do you recommend?
So a lot of the negative aspects of bamboo have come from the running bamboos that were encouraged by actually the government in South Carolina, North Carolina, and into Georgia for erosion control. And while they do very good job at erosion control, if they're kept unchecked and they're an aggressive grower, that can become an issue 100 years later, which is almost where we're at. So we in Florida have really great products is that we have clumping bamboos. If you go out into your grass, you have both clumping little grasses, and then you have like, say, your St. Augustine, which is a running grass, right? And all grasses are kind of divided up into these two things. The clumping are circles. Those circles get bigger and bigger. The running start in one place and move horizontally to another place. That being said, grasses are the most adaptable plants on the earth. And so there's lots of variations in between there. So same with clumping bamboos. There are clumping bamboos that stay very, very tight, like a Richard Waldron, which in like 6 years is still only going to be about 1.5 feet, across. Or there's ones, say, like these big dendrocalamuses, which are true tropicals that can get, 20 feet across in about the same amount of time, right? So it depends, like maybe like 15 years. So all sorts of things in between. And that's where it comes into like utilizing the bamboos. One of the easiest ways to utilize bamboos is to take them and run them through a chipper and feed them back to your other plants because they're so high in minerals. So this is remineralizing your soil and adding those nutrients into the soil. Our soils get very depleted very quickly because we're in tropical, subtropical areas. And so one of the best ways is to grow your biomass to feed back to your plants, whether it's ornamentals or whether you're trying to grow food for nutritive value. This is a really good way to utilize bamboos and kind of keep them in check.
Yeah. And so is there ever a use for a running bamboo other than like you said, erosion control?
Sure. There's lots. There's lots. So the United States and especially the South used to be covered in primarily running bamboos. We are down to 2%. There's 4 native bamboos to the United States. We usually know them as canebrake. And these, during the Cretaceous period, when bamboos first originated, we were attached to Asia. North America was attached to Asia. And so all of these grasses evolved together, and we ended up with these 4 running bamboos that basically were decimated by the colonists because of where they were is where the fertility in the earth was. So in general, all across the world, people have looked to where the bamboos grow to see where the fertility is to grow other crops. So here in the Southeast, what we did was we removed the bamboos in order to grow things like cotton and tobacco. And so now we're down to a very, very small percentage. That being said, running bamboos, and they like to call them colonizers because they colonize an area, can be useful for things like protecting animals, just like our native running bamboos were useful for protecting animals and really providing shelter and places for animals to hide, as well as forage, as well as being used by the indigenous people. These Asian running bamboos also provide fertility for the soil. They provide erosion control. They can be used as forage. They can be used in all the different ways. They can be used to feed back to the soil. So their biggest problem is that they're not being kept in check.
And so when you're talking about, there's a few things. I'm taking notes as you're talking. So when you're talking about native running bamboos, are there any native clumping bamboos for those who want to stick with native plants?
No.
Okay. So if you're looking for native, just gotta keep it in a pot then, I would assume, if you don't want it running all over your yard.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And Central Florida is really kind of the southern tip of where the Arundel areas would grow. So we're kind of right at the cusp. It's a smaller understory plant. You'd see it more as you go further north. But yeah, if you, and in general, a running bamboo doesn't really like to stay in a pot because its growth comes through movement, and colonizing areas. So, I love the idea of planting native plants. I love the idea of planting native bamboos. And I would love to talk to anybody who wants to work in that direction for sure, because we need to have more of them back.
Yeah. And so, and when you're talking about potentially removing, historically removing bamboo, and people who may have running bamboo and they just don't want it anymore, and they want to plant something else or clumping bamboo, how do you remove a running bamboo? Because it seems like that is where people start pulling their hair out.
Yes, that's exactly where the biggest problems come. That being said, some people have very large clumping bamboos that they also want to remove. And I think one of the frustrations for people is that this is not a small job, especially if we're talking like in general, this doesn't happen overnight. What it does is like somebody planted something, you either bought the property that had it on there for 20 years and nobody did anything, or nobody paid attention. And then all of a sudden, it's a fast forward of 25, 30 years later. It's never something that happens between now and next week. It's always something that is a long period of time in between, or you're coming in to inherit an issue. So that being said, the first thing you have to do is cut running bamboo off from its source. What I often see is that it's not just on one property, because we have property lines, but plants don't have property lines, right? They just go. So it's usually comes from several different sources, and not all of those people can, agree on whether they want or don't want it. And so the first thing you have to do is establish on your property line a boundary to cut off the bamboo from its other source, because otherwise it'll keep feeding back. The second thing you have to do is remove all the top of the bamboo. This is true for a clumping or a running bamboo. So you remove all the tops. If it's a clumping bamboo, you remove all the top, and then you can stump grind everything. The one thing that bamboos that you have going for you if you're removing bamboos is that the root system is fairly shallow, meaning it's like in that first 2 feet. So you're not doing a tap root. So using a stump grinder to grind down the rhizomes and then cutting everything back. There is no plant on this planet that can continue to grow unless it can continue to feed itself. So you just have to be a little more diligent than the plant is itself. And that's just a continuation of cutting off the green and letting it compost. And then you can absolutely do that.
And is there any, I'm going to be all over the place because you talk, you give me so much information that I'm like taking a million notes. So when we're to refer back to when you're talking about the benefits, the culinary benefits, is there any bamboo that you can eat raw?
There are a few. Yes. Yeah. There are a few. We call them sweet shoots. We call them sweet shoots. And there's a farm that I work with that is starting to propagate and have a collection of those. Right now, there's only 2 varieties and they're not available commercially yet.
Okay. So, but it is, people are working on finding the ones that you can eat raw. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. That's awesome.
It's
and
amazing.
So, when in your website references using bamboo for privacy screening, noise reduction, wildlife habitat, how can you, and you also say that you like to benefit or you like to combine like beauty with usefulness. How do you recommend people who want to plant bamboo do these things? Like how can you utilize all of these different options in your yard?
Yeah. So it is always about context, like depending on what your goals are and how much space you have and how much you want to give to the bamboos and what you're trying to get from them, right? These are always like, this is why it's so important to make sure that you're planting the right plant in the right place, is because there's so many varieties of bamboos and they all look really cute when they're little, right? And then what happens is people plant something in their yard and then 5 years later, they're like, whoa, that got really big really fast, but it didn't. It just kind of chunked along. So it's very helpful to really work with somebody, especially on the bamboos, who really know what you're getting and just to know what type of bamboo you're putting in. That's really and then what you want to achieve from it.
Yeah, I mean, I have been down over to Andy Firk's house in Arcadia, and some of his bamboo was like 4 or 5 inches, like each was like 4 or 5 inches thick. Like that's some of it is massive.
Yeah. Giganteus. I have Giganteus growing in Stewart I think it's 4 years old and it's sending up 8-inch diameter.
Wow.
Yeah.
You do that.
Build. So like for instance, So one of the things I'll put out there is like I always offer free bamboo to artists who want to utilize it and build with it. I try to make it as available as possible because I want people to utilize bamboos. And so there's usually several projects during the year that I will donate bamboos or at a very low cost. Give bamboos to build. And so, for instance, one of the projects that just went on was Art for Me in Miami at Art Basel, which just happened on Saturday. There's usually a couple of projects at Love Burn, which is also in Miami. We have a project that I'll be personally at Okeechobee Music Festival. So these music festivals tend to be really great place to build with bamboo. One is because you can get around the code. So these are temporary builds. So you can do a lot of creative things with building with bamboos. Building with bamboos is incredibly fun. And also like you can do things that you can't do with wood. It's more like working with metal because you can heat bend it. You can do splits. If you just look up like anything to do with bamboo and Bali, you'll start seeing some images that you had no idea you could build like this. And so festivals is a really great way where people can do lots of building. But I'm also like, if you need bamboo and you want to start playing with it, just reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. And we do have a phone call. I'd like to welcome to the Sustainable Living Show, Judy from Lutz.
Hi there. Hi, I'm a first-time caller, and thanks for your program. I live in Lutz, and I have some bamboo. I believe it's called Old Hamai, really large bamboo, and then I have a Buddha belly that's gotten very leggy, and every year I cut some of it down, and then I end up putting it into segments and setting it out for the pickup for the home waste. You mentioned that you could put it in a chipper and grind it and then put it back into your soil. And I have a question about that. Is that something that a homeowner could do where I could just maybe go to Home Depot and rent a chipper and do that? And if so, are there any precautions? Like how would I go about doing that? And then also when I augment the soil in my raised vegetable beds, is there a certain percentage or proportion of the bamboo that I would do, that I would put into the soil?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. That's such a great question because bamboos are one of the easiest things to put back in the soil. That being said, you have two that are fairly on the larger side. So you're going to need either a bigger size chipper or to split them ahead of time if you have a smaller chipper. One of the plants I like to recommend if you are starting out and want to plant something to use as a biomass is either fernleaf or graceful because the textilis graceful is very thin-walled and fernleaf is just a small plant. You have Old Hamai and you have vulgaris, the Waman Buddha belly, which are also just fine to use. You're just going to need a little bit bigger chipper. As far as putting that into your garden and your raised bed, that's an amazing way to use it because you can get all the silica and minerals into your soil that's helping you have a remineralized soil so that your plants can uptake that. I mean, you can use it as a top dressing, like as much as you would use like a mulch. If you've already got plants planted in your raised bed and you're mulching around them, there isn't really too much other than like keeping moisture around them like you would with regular mulch. You can also mix it into the soil. Bamboos break down very rapidly, so the funguses and things like that will break them down and make soil. I've done where like I took a chipper and just had it pointed at this one single stalk banana and just buried it in bamboo because I just was chipping into it. And I buried it in like 3 feet of bamboo. Within 2 months, it sent up like 15 pups, just blasted off. So it's a really good source of food. If you don't have enough to chip on, which in your case you do, you can also chip it back to the bamboos themselves. That's another option to feed the bamboos. If you don't have enough, you can make a tea either from the leaves, which is super easy, or you can chip up material and boil it and make a tea, and you can use that as a foliar spray. So Rudolf Steiner in biodynamics back in the late 1800s, he came up with an idea of spraying silica on plants, and the cannabis industry that's always way far ahead on like growing food. They know that if you foliar spray with silica on small plants, it makes them stronger. It makes them more resilient. And so it's a really effective way to utilize your bamboos.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Judy. You too. And I'd like to welcome to the Sustainable Living Show, Chris from Gainesville.
Great. Well, I just wanted to ask 3 quick questions or get 3 quick comments on it. One is skin problems. I have a lot of running bamboo, and I was trying to control it in my yard, and I found the insides of my forearms were getting very rashy or irritated by the bamboo, and that's one thing. And the other thing is I understood you could boil any of the leaves and then do something with them. Like, do you drain the boil water, and does that become tea, or is it automatically tea? Or do you drain the boil water off and then use the leaves like spinach? And the third comment was I ate some of the very tender young shoots of bamboo, thinking it was wonderful and probably very edible. I don't know where I got that notion, but I got very sick. So apparently the running bamboo shoots can't be eaten raw. And I'll listen off the air. Thank you.
Yeah. So in general, like we don't eat grasses. So we're not going to eat the leaves of the grasses. We're going to take the tea. Same with like utilizing it for, now I will have animals, even cats and dogs that will eat grass at certain times, just like they go out and eat grass in the yard. But for people, we're not eating the leaf part. We're utilizing the tea from it. As far as like the hairs, some bamboos have hairs. The blue bamboo, for instance, has a lot of hairs. Some of the more tropical ones have more hairs. Some of them don't have any hairs. Old hamite doesn't have any hairs at all. So some people are more or less sensitive to things. Bamboos also tend to collect. They're like an ecosystem. They collect a lot of things on it. And that can also be something that may or may not you have sensitivity to. I work with long sleeves on any plants just because plants have phytochemicals that help them protect them against things coming at them, right? And so these phytochemicals we can be sensitive to. I happen to be very sensitive to Brazilian pepper, for instance, which a lot of people are. So that's, and then...
Well, quick question.
Yeah.
When you're making tea or eating bamboo and you're cooking it, do you have to wash them off first to get rid of these hairs before you make a tea or cook them?
So in general, the leaves don't really have hairs in general. And as far as like washing them off, that's up to you. I mean, some of them might have dust or things like that. You can wash them. The nutrients in bamboos, this is very important to understand, is that the nutrients in bamboos are super locked down because they're so fibrous. So when you're doing teas, it would be, you want to heat them. You want to treat a bamboo leaf like you would making tea from a bark or a mushroom or something harder like that. So you want to really heat it. You cannot, it's not like mint where you can't get above like 180 into it and you ruin it. You can heat these things. And okay, you're not a tea drinker. That's fine. You can take it, bamboo leaves, and use them like you would like a bay leaf or like a culinary, like a rosemary or something like that. You can use them for their phytochemicals and for their minerals by putting it in, say you're making a soup or a stew or you're boiling rice. You can put that in there and you can get all the nutrients back through utilizing it that way.
Awesome. And we are running out of time. I would like to welcome John to the Sustainable Living Show. We have time for a quick question, John.
Thank you, guys. I love the Sustainable Living Show. A quick question about bamboo. What about fencing and using it for fencing? I have a wood fence. I guess the wood is pine or something, but what about bamboo for fencing? Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what he's currently asking is what varieties would be good for fencing.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So
thanks, John.
A lot of times what I do is I plant living fences, meaning there's two different types of fences, right? You can do a living fence like you would a hedge or something like that, where you're making like a living wall that's up against your other wall that gives you that, all the things that we've talked about. It gives habitat for birds and food for animals and yourself and all of that, right? And a visual privacy that can be a lot taller than what you're legally allowed to go to on a privacy fence, right? Most of the time we're talking about 6 feet on a privacy fence, but you can go taller on a plant. So the other way that you're talking about is construction. And construction gets a little more nuanced, because if you want it to last, you will need to treat the bamboo poles in order to have them last longer. I do workshops here and there throughout the year on bamboo building specifically. I love the idea of using bamboos as building. One of the simplest forms you could do is just to utilize something like a smaller bamboo, like an Alphonse car or a fern leaf, and do kind of like a wattle, like a weaving, that type of fencing. You can also, once the material is dry, there's different preservation, and this is kind of gets into a lot more nuances, but you can preserve it externally by keeping it off the ground. The big key things: harvest in the wintertime when it's dry, keeping the bamboo off the ground so it doesn't wick moisture, preserving it with something. That can mean like anything from like an oil to like essential oil blend to like a neem oil to like all sorts of things that you can do externally. And then keeping, when you cut at the node, you've got a solid end, and keeping that solid end so that there's no external piece for things to get in. Those are kind of the basics, but it goes a lot more than that. Just check me out on This Bamboo Life, and I'm happy to help and answer all your questions as well.
Awesome. Thank you for your call, John. So what are some of the easiest varieties to start with? Like something that is clumping that maybe gets like 6 to 10 feet that you can start with a fence line?
Yeah. So that is always the number one question is as to how to do that. And the number one plant that gets utilized is graceful. And graceful is kind of the ideal plant at this moment. It gets about 20 feet tall, though a lot of people will hedge it. It's very upright. It's very dense. It's very thin-walled, so it's easy to work with. So that's kind of the number one plant in Florida at the moment. You can use fern leaf, which gets about 14 feet tall, but it's got more of a mushroom, wider shape. So unless you hedge it, it kind of gets as wide as it does tall. And in that range, there's several other varieties that are also textilis or multiplexes that are kind of small on that side.
And so how would people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so This Bamboo Life is the name of my company. And again, I love to answer questions. Please reach out. I love to educate on bamboos and how to use them. Really, utilization is my big thing. Also, I wanted to say that I do an event every year called the Permaculture Convergence. It is a sustainable program where it's all hands-on, no PowerPoints. It's all about growing food. We have agroforestry, we have bamboo building, we have fermenting, cooking with fire, all sorts of things. And so that is a really great place to start. There's usually about 400 or 500 people. Next year, we'll be doing it November 6th through the 8th at London Island Preserve, which is just outside of Point Siena. So if you want to learn more about bamboos, that's a great place to start.
Awesome. And your website is thisbamboolife.com?
Yeah. And I do a lot on social media to try and educate on utilization.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shanti, for taking the time to do the show with us. So
thank you. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, Sage, for taking the calls. Thank you, Bill Grace, for working the boards. Grace Benke for our website updates. It does take a community to build a community. Make sure to tune in next Monday morning at 11 for the Sustainable Living Show, where we will be talking with the Food Sovereignty Initiative. If you enjoy our show and you want to keep us on the air, please go to WMNF.org and use that donation button and direct your donation to the Sustainable Living Show. You can follow our Facebook page, Sustainable Living WMNF, to stay in the loop. Also, you can listen to our past shows by going to listen on demand on WMNF.org or as a podcast on your favorite provider. And then stay tuned, stay locked into WMNF for the next hour to hear Community Speaks with Mabili. I am Tanya Vidovic, and you are listening to The Sustainable Living Show.
Everybody lives on a street in a city or a village or a town for what it's worth. And they're all inside a country which is part of a continent which sits upon a planet known as Earth. And the Earth is a bowl full of oceans and some mountains that is out there spinning silently in space. And living on the Earth are the plants and the animals and also the entire human race. And we're part of a vast interplanetary system stretching 700 billion miles long. With 8 planets and a sun, we think the Earth's the only one that has life on it, although we could be wrong. Across the interstellar void there's a billion asteroids, including meteors and Halley's Comet too. And there's over 50 moons spinning out there like balloons in a panoramic trillion-mile view. And still it's just a speck across 100 billion stars in a galaxy we call the Milky Way. It's 60,000 trillion miles from one end to the other, and still that's just a fraction of the way. Cause there's 100 billion galaxies that stretch across the sky, filled with constellations, planets, moons and stars. And still the universe extends to a place that never ends, that's maybe just inside a little jar. It's a great big universe and we are really puny, just tiny little specks, just the size of Mickey Rooney. Though we don't know how we got here,